Ever wonder how a simple idea explodes into something iconic, like Apple or Nike? Well, it's definitely not magic. It's actually a really deliberate process. So, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on how top design studios work. We'll look at how they take a core strategy and turn it into a visual identity you just can't forget. Let's dive in. All right, so here's our game plan. First up, we're going to break down what branding really means. It's more than you think. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of strategy, the blueprint that sets everything up for success. We'll also tackle the business side of things. We're talking contracts, clients, and cash. After that, we'll jump into the fun part, the creative leap, and we'll wrap it all up with some seriously invaluable lessons straight from the pros. Okay, let's kick things off with a huge fundamental truth. A great brand, it's so much more than just a cool logo. It's a whole experience, and getting that idea is absolutely the cornerstone of any effective branding. I mean, the legend himself, Paul Rand, hit the nail on the head. He said great design isn't some random spark of genius. Nope. It's a carefully thought out solution that comes from really, really understanding the problem you're trying to solve. And honestly, that right there, that's what separates the pros from the amateurs. This whole idea of branding, it's not new. Not at all. It's been with us for centuries. Think about it. You've got ancient tribes using special markings to tell each other apart. Ancient Egyptians literally branding their cattle to show ownership. And it all leads up to 1876, when Bass Ale became the very first trademarked brand. It just goes to show that need for unique identity, it's basically baked into our DNA. So, what are we really talking about when we say visual identity? Well, think of it like the face, or really the entire personality of a business. It's literally everything a customer might see, hear, or even feel. We're talking logos, websites, sure, but also staff uniforms, the tone of voice in their ads, the whole shebang. It's a complete sensory experience, and the goal is to make it super consistent and totally memorable. So the big question is, how do you actually build one of these strong visual identities? Well, I'll tell you this. The real work starts way, way before anyone even thinks about opening Photoshop. It all begins with strategy. That's the blueprint, the foundation that makes sure the final design actually works. Top-tier studios, like one we'll talk about called Lantern, have this down to a science. They use a tried-and-true three-step process. First up is the audit. That's where they get a super deep understanding of the client's world. Next, they do a workshop, where everyone gets together to shape the vision. And finally, there's the brief. This is the document that becomes the North Star for all the creative work that follows. So this brand audit, it's basically a full-on investigation. It's way more than just, spying on the competition. It's about mapping out the entire landscape. You're asking, what are the real opportunities here? What's everyone else doing? And the most important question of all, how can this brand be different and actually stand out? Now, how you capture that strategy can look pretty different. Take Lantern, for example. They like a really functional, objective-driven brief. It's all about project scope, audiences, business goals. But then you have a studio like Base Design, who once got this incredibly poetic story brief. It was just a short, vivid scene about a father and son and a billboard. Totally different, right? Both ways are totally valid. They just ignite creativity in very different ways. Okay, so the strategy is locked in. Now it's time to talk about the business side of things. Yeah, contracts, clients, and cash. It might not be the sexy part, but this stuff is the absolute backbone of any successful creative project. So let's just address the elephant in the room, shall we? What does this kind of professional branding actually cost? Okay, get this. A studio like Base Design, their projects start at 50,000 euros. And look, that's not just a fee for a pretty logo. You're investing in a whole dedicated team. You get a strategist, a writer, a designer, all of them committed to building a brand that has real long-term value and delivers a serious return on that investment. All right, here's a golden rule, straight from the pros at Lantern. Never, ever start creative work until you have a down payment. That 50% deposit, it's not just about cash flow. It's a signal. It solidifies the commitment from both sides, and it's the official starting gun for the project. And Base Design is right there with them. A signed contract is key before you do anything, because it's so much more than a financial thing, it's a roadmap. It clearly lays out what's being delivered and when. This is your number one protection against scope creep. That thing where a project just keeps growing and growing? A contract makes sure everyone's on the same page from the get-go. Here's a super important negotiation tip. What happens when a client says they love your work, but they need a lower price?
The answer is, you don't devalue your work by slashing the price. Instead, you reduce the deliverables. You adjust the scope of the project to fit their budget. That way, you're protecting the value of what you do.
Okay, business is handled. Contracts are signed. Now for the fun part. This is the creative leap, where all that research and strategy gets transformed into a big, powerful idea that people will actually remember. I love this quote from the studio, Ferris. It just perfectly captures the creative mindset. They were working on a music festival, and the question they asked was, how can we turn the sound of music into something palpable and visual? See that? The most innovative work starts with these big, abstract questions, not just what looks cool. Of course, it's not always a smooth ride. We've all been there, right? Staring at a blank page. So what do you do when you hit a creative block? Well, the folks at Lantern have some great techniques. You can try inverting your whole thought process, or just take a break and step away. Another great one is to chat with your client in more detail. Or, one of my favorites, work backward from the final application. Start at the end and see where it takes you. Now, when it's time to actually present the big idea, there are kind of two different philosophies. On one hand, you have a studio like Lantern. They like to present two distinct creative routes. It gives the client a clear, strategic choice. But then you have Base. They often present just one single powerful answer. It's a bold move that really shows their confidence in their collaborative process. All right, we've covered a ton of ground, from strategy to business to the creative spark. So now let's boil it all down to the most important lessons, the key takeaways that you can apply to your own brand, whether you're a designer or a founder. Okay, this first one is a total game changer. When you present your creative work, just stop talking. Say nothing. Let the client have the first gut reaction. Seriously, they know their business better than anyone, and that initial unfiltered perspective, it's absolute gold. A lot of people think of brand guidelines as these restrictive rules, right? A creative straitjacket. But the pros, they see them completely differently. They're not rules, they're tools. They're a framework for consistency, yeah, but they're also a creative playground, a toolkit that lets you build and innovate while still staying true to what the brand is all about. Here's a philosophy from Base Design that I just love. Surprise is the best gift you can give your client. It's about always trying to exceed the brief. Delivering something they didn't see coming, that's what turns a good project into a truly great one. It's how you build a real partnership and, ultimately, an iconic brand. So, when you boil it all down, your brand is your story. It's the promise you're making to every single customer. We've just walked through how the absolute best in the business do it. So now it's time to turn that question around on you. Your brand is your story. Are you telling the right one?